When Star Wars Mandalorian released, it was groundbreaking, but now that the future is Mandalorian, how is that going to change things? Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. As we learn more and more about specific species and characters in Star Wars, is that actually going to change our perception of it? Are we going to get annoyed with that? And I think we're going to have our answer sometime in the next few years, because we're getting a huge investment in the idea and mystique around the Mandalorians. Obviously, we got the whole Mandalorian seasons 1, 2, and 3. We've got some spin-offs with the Book of Boba Fett. We've had a ton of stories with them in the Clone Wars and some even in Rebels. So there's a lot of content out there when you look at the Mandalorians. But with this new rumor going around, I want to talk about what this actually means for Star Wars as a whole. And as we've gotten more and more of the Mandalorians in Star Wars, their story has changed quite a bit. Going from the first season's weapons are part of my religion to now being like, well, yeah, we're Mandalorians, and this over here, that's a cult, but we're kind of fine with that now, even though the whole first and even second season really is this overcoming of a cult-like religious sect of the Mandalorians, and how to overcome that prejudice, you kind of have to make some changes. That was like the original story of 1 and 2 when you boil it down, really. And to season 3 where they're like, yeah, that like deep, really interesting like discussion piece, we're not even going to touch on that anymore. So I think that's where things start to change for the Mandalorians. And then you look at Boba Fett, who technically isn't a Mandalorian. He's a clone. And then even Jango Fett, I don't believe, was a Mandalorian. Depending on what sources you look at, who necessarily knows, there's been a lot to his story, both in Legends and canon, in terms of complication. But when you look at the Mandalorians as a whole, they're very interesting to a point. But when you boil it down and you look a little bit deeper, they're kind of boring. And there might be a little bit of a controversial take, like they just wear armor and they look cool and they fight each other. That is really it. There isn't a whole lot of complexity. Obviously, there's the families, but they haven't gotten into that since Clone Wars again. And they technically can't, because Mandalore was destroyed and most of the Mandalorians are spread throughout the galaxy. That part of their story is actually fascinating. How can you rebuild this family sect and these pieces throughout the galaxy when they are so dispersed? I think that piece could be interesting. The reason I'm talking about this right now is because of this rumor of a new Star Wars video game coming out. Respawn, the creators of the Jedi series, Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, are rumored to be making a single-player first-person shooter game set around a Mandalorian. Now, we've known that they've been working on a first-person shooter game. A lot of people were hoping that it would be an online game. I'm actually quite happy that we're getting a single-player shooter, because one, we haven't seen a whole lot of those in the video game space recently, and we haven't seen one in Star Wars, period. The closest we've come would be the single-player campaign in Battlefront 2, but that wasn't necessarily enough for me, and that was third person anyway. So there's a big gap when you think about it to first-person single-player shooters. And I'm personally really excited about this. Yes, would I like to see an online shooter? Probably. Yeah, if they came out with that, I would be all down for it. I think they did a terrible job with handling Battlefront, and that could have been a huge piece of Star Wars that they just did not capitalize on, mostly due to DICE's destruction as a developer, in terms of a lot of the veterans leaving and a lot of new people being in there, and then just Disney's mismanagement of video games, period. But the one studio that seems to be able to pull this off is actually Respawn. They've definitely pulled up Star Wars from the ashes when you look at it from a video game aspect, because they have created 2 of the best Star Wars video games, period. The question that we're all asking, is this the Mandalorian? And from the rumors, it does not seem like it. And it seems like this is going to be another take on the original Star Wars The Mandalorian Season 1 idea of this bounty hunter Mandalorian that is on a quest. It is very early on in development, but the report claims that it is fast-paced with a big focus on action, and it will not be an open-world experience, which I am all for. I love this trend of these games kind of getting a little bit smaller, getting away from the open world tropes and doing something a little bit differently. I think Star Wars in particular benefits from it quite well with this guided story. Star Wars is all about the story. Yes, the world's there, but the story is what keeps people coming, and I think that's what they're trying to capitalize on here, and I'm all for it. Respawn, obviously the team behind Titanfall and Apex, they are one of the best first-person shooters when it comes to mechanics and just game feel. Everything is solid and robust, and I'm so looking forward to it. But from a lore perspective, I want to talk about this because I think this is where it gets a little bit interesting in the broader Star Wars world. When we look at the time frame that this game could take place in, I want to theorize here on some ideas that I have on where it could work quite well. My first one is I think they could go into the clone time frame. Like when we look at Respawn, they are post Clone Wars. They're getting ever closer to this original trilogy, but they've tied a lot of inspiration around this kind of aesthetic of Clone Wars, prequel trilogy meets original trilogy, like that transitionary period. I think they've done really well with, but I think this could be an awesome opportunity for them to go into the prequel era a little bit more. Maybe do this idea where, yeah, we've got the Mandalorians rocking and rolling. This is almost like right around the downfall of the Mandalorians, and have this key piece where you have these scattered Mandalorians. Maybe it's even close to the glassing of the Mandalorian planet or something along those lines, because I think that could be a good excuse for why there is yet another Mandalorian bounty hunter. Obviously, we know from lore that the Mandalorians post-Mandalore falling and the War of the Mandalorians, most of them went into the bounty hunter trade. A lot of them did, at least. The ones that wanted to continue to have a place in the galaxy, that's where they went. Because they had the perfect experience for this, honestly. Like, they are born to fight. They are a warrior race almost, and this is really interesting to think about when we look at another Mandalorian bounty hunter, and one without this redemption arc that Din Djarin finds. I think could be interesting, and more than likely we're gonna see something where probably not gonna be part of the watch, so they could have a face reveal moment or something like that, like have a different storytelling than the one that we've already seen. And I think that's where they really need to stand out and differentiate themselves. But in terms of my theory on it, I think it's going to take place during that time frame, and I hope we get some good insights into some of that past and history that we've only seen mentions of and glimpses of in the TV shows. But let me know your thoughts when it comes to the Mandalorian video game and where it could be, and this focus and idea on Mandalorian as this like foundation piece of the future of Star Wars. Let me know in the comments below. Check out our podcast, and may the Force be with you.